For some years, I'd been researching into the development of a black light source. That is, an electrically powered device capable of darkening a light room. And so it was with great interest that I read a short article in the scientific journal to which I subscribed concerning a biophysicist named Mangricino, who claimed to have perfected a small black light unit which could plug into a conventional lamp fitting and which consumed less power than a 60-watt light bulb. The article was written in disbelief. One short paragraph devoted to ridiculing his claim. The other described the man's insanity and recent incarceration into Wood Hill Hospital, from where it now seemed unlikely he'd ever be discharged. My curiosity was roused. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital and was shown to the ward by a talkative young nurse, only too glad to relieve her boredom with harmless gossip about a mad scientist. Mangricino lay motionless on his back. His eyes were open yet blankly fixed. He was incapable of movement or speech and could not, it seemed, comprehend anything said to him. It took less than an hour to find the large Edwardian house set in its ample grounds where the scientist had been discovered by a cleaner 3 weeks earlier, unconscious in an upstairs room. The door round the back was easy enough to open with a sharp kick. I made a preliminary tour of the downstairs rooms, finally coming to a door under the stairs which led down to a basement. It had a cold stone floor, a long and cluttered worktop, and several large cabinets containing files which I found to be brimming with documentation of the scientist's work. I found a diagram showing a conventionally proportioned bulb unit, but matte black, and with a surface raised at regular intervals into small hexagonal pimples. According to Mangricino's notes, it was capable of, and I quote,
absorbing all light present within certain cubic parameters defined by enclosed surfaces, including transparent ones, using a negative gravitational field to attract the mass and energy of all local electromagnetic radiation and convert it into dark matter.
In layman's language, it was a bulb capable of darkening a light room, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, window to door, at the flick of a switch. It was an incredible claim, and if it were true, then Mangricino was both a genius and a wealthy man beyond belief. But then I had the recollection of his lifeless body in that hospital bed, the dull, staring eyes. As I read on, I was unnerved by the feeling of all logic in reverse, of life turned upside down. Man had evolved and developed ways of filling his fear of the dark unknown with safe artificial light, of illuminating as many shady corners as he could. Yet here, the opposite. An innocuous-looking black bulb with which one might kindle the most primeval fears at the touch of a switch. I glanced at my watch. It was late and I was tired. There was one more file to go, and this one told me what I wanted to know. In a room upstairs, I found the little monster, sitting waiting for me. A small grey vase-shaped table lamp was its base, the sort one could buy in any department store, and then the beast itself, sitting proud on top. As the diagram had shown, the prototype was similar to a normal bulb, only black and knobbly, rather porous looking and satiny in texture. Disproportionately heavy, as I discovered on removing it carefully from its holder. It felt solid, yet one sensed a soft, mobile core. There was a liquid momentum about it if one gently tilted it. A sort of mercurial motion from within, as though it were answerable to forces and properties of its own, and exempt from the Earth's gravity. Perhaps it was the very unease that nighttime can irrationally evoke which made that small black object seem so evil. I replaced it in its holder and told myself not to be so ridiculous. I followed the flex down to a timing device on the plug, which Mangricino must have used for controlled experiments. The simplest flick of the switch, and I would have the demonstration I craved. Yet for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to make the test. It seemed to defy all rational laws. It was symbolic of something more frightful. This perverse little device seemed to possess the power of death within its dark interior. I told myself I was exaggerating, poised my finger over the switch again, but still I couldn't go through with it. Finally, I made the excuse that a test in broad daylight would reveal much more about the bulb's true capabilities, and I found a bedroom and collapsed for the night. I awoke at 7:20. It was a perfect sunny day, and as so often with the passing of night, my fears were gone. I got dressed and went down to Mangricino's kitchen, where I made a pot of coffee and took it upstairs. The time had come. Now I realized why Mangricino had chosen this room for his tests. It was the brightest in the house, having as it did the substantial bay window spanning the far wall. I sipped my coffee to reassure myself of the mundane things of life. Then I sat down by the plug, mentally prepared myself, reached over to the switch, then quickly flicked the button down. Instantly, everything went black. I waited, set it out for 5 seconds, then 10, keeping my finger on that button all the time. Maybe my eyes would adjust and notice some faint light leaking through the window. There was nothing, just total blackness. And more peculiarly, a feeling that all sound too was in some way absorbed and consumed by the bulb. I tested my voice, and the words seemed to be devoured by the invisible creature to my right, no sooner than I'd formed them in my mind. When I flicked the switch again, all normal light was instantly restored to the room. It took a while before I could fully comprehend the nature of what I'd just witnessed, and I would be the one to tell the world. The cleaner who had discovered Mangricino slumped in his pitiful state probably had no conception of his work, and the scientific fraternity now wrote him off as insane. But my own tests were not over yet. I wanted to walk about in that artificial darkness. I wanted to get a true feel of it. I wanted to go over to the window and try to look outside. But the memory of Mangricino made me cautious. I set the dial on the timer to cut off after 2 minutes exactly, and positioned myself again. Once more I pressed the button, and once more there was instant darkness. I got up and carefully groped my way to the window, perhaps imagining that my limbs were heavier and slower than usual. One could see nothing outside, even with one's face pressed hard and at an angle against the glass. I tried to actually contact my eye on the pane itself, but suddenly I felt nauseous and my purpose seemed lost. I fell back and staggered for a while before catching hold of the arm of the sofa. Simultaneously, the timer clicked. My 2 minutes were up, and the room came to life again. I slumped back into the sofa, out of breath. I was shaking. Something else had started to happen that time. I took another sip of my coffee. It was freezing cold less than 10 minutes after it had been too hot to drink. The bulb was beginning to scare me again, and I was now doubting its practical everyday applications. There was one more test I wanted to make. I set the timer for 2 minutes again, but this time I also set my watch to bleep at 15-second intervals. I went to the window and released the catch on the large central sash. Then I went back and sat down, breathing deeply all the time to counteract my excitement. It was fear now which was driving me on. There comes a point where safety and reason fail, and danger itself is the motivating force. I knew the bulb was powerful, had felt it that last time. Once more I pressed the button. I sat there motionless and calm for 2 bleeps at my watch. Then I got up and carefully trod over to the window, pushing slightly against that same reverse force I'd felt before. Another bleep went off. I felt for the smooth pane of glass, traced it up to the open catch. I waited there with my hands ready on the upper bar of the bottom window. The 5th and 6th bleeps sounded. Then I summoned all my courage, and exactly on the 7th, 1 3/4 minutes in, I thrust that lower window upwards. The experience was unexpectedly pleasurable. A new type of vision was instated, and I saw my body fall away like a useless, discarded receptacle. My screen cut dead as if it had been electrically disconnected, and my last sight in the room was of a strange yet beautiful visual vibration of new colours I've never seen before and cannot convey, which built up between the bottom edge of the window and the window frame itself. And then I spent some years with Mangricino in a new boundless region of exceptional clarity, where everything extended forever in astonishing colours which bore no relation to the pitiful hues of earth. And later, after these years where we seem to do nothing, yet know everything, I found again my body, lying beneath the windowsill, and I pulled myself to my feet in the restored light of that room, and glancing at my watch, observed that only 20 seconds had elapsed since the time I'd set the bulb to go off, only 35 seconds since my amazing experience had commenced. I dropped back onto the settee, recalling what had happened, unable to grasp it. It felt as if I'd been beaten up, bruised yet intact, and terribly hungry. It was in Mangricino's kitchen that I became aware of the true damage I'd incurred. I went straight to a cupboard which I knew to contain a jar of marmalade. I knew precisely how much marmalade there would be in that jar. I knew where the knives were kept, the plates, the bread. I knew there was a Ford truck in the garage. and that my wife had left me 3 years ago. The intimate details of Mangricino's life poured into me, but worst of all, as the process continued, I was suddenly aware my feelings were not just my own, they were Mangricino's as well, but not harmonious or unified. Instead, a terrible fight broke out inside my body, which produced a panic I can never describe, that sent me straight back up those stairs. I opened every window as wide as it would go. There was a battle raging in every corner of my existence now. It felled me to the knees. I crawled sobbing to the power point and pressed the switch down. The open windows all shone and danced in brilliant colours. My thoughts and feelings shot in orgasm like a torpedo from my redundant body, back through that vortex of time into the vacuous black bulb of bliss.